It's Christmas! In this video, we're going to make a Christmas-inspired weaving. So let's get started. All right, so I want to make a weaving that is Christmas-inspired, but maybe not as overtly Christmas as some things. Not that I don't like that, but because I have such a huge stash of yarn that I really try not to be always buying new yarns, and so I'm working with what I've got today. I'm not going to lie to you, we're going to be making a weaving very similar to the one that I did 2 videos ago. Shall I show you? This is the weaving that we are going to be making in a Christmas-inspired color palette. I feel like I'm always saying this weaving would look great in so many different color palettes, and then I never actually do that. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Here are the colors that I feel pretty sure about when it comes to this weaving, and they are on that Christmas theme. So we have a couple different colors of merino wool roving. We have some cotton string, a couple colors of recycled silk chiffon, recycled cotton frizz ribbon, and then this is something I've had in my stash for a long time. I won't be able to link this one because it is probably literally 10 years old and it doesn't exist anymore, but it is a mix color yarn and it has some sparkly silver plied with it as well, which I thought would be so perfect for a Christmas themed weaving and give it a little bit of sparkle. And then there's some colors that I'm a little less sure about. So I also have this yarn in a darker color, which I thought could be fun if this one is feeling too light. I could do both, but I'm not sure I want to. And then the other color I'm thinking I might want to bring in is this sort of somewhat chartreuse. I don't even know. It's kind of a cross between a mustard and a chartreuse, I would say, because it is a little bit more on the green side, but it's not quite as, I don't know, to me it doesn't read quite as chartreuse as a lot of chartreuse, if that makes any sense at all. Then I also have a couple more options. So I have this light blue and this light pink. And the main reason I was thinking particularly the light pink is because I really wanted to bring some of this yarn texture in and maybe add another lighter color, but I don't know if I want to add like an outright off-white again. So that's where I'm at. We're going to get started. I'm going to be choosing these colors as I go, seeing what feels good in the moment, because as I know about myself is that I can't really plan these out beforehand, because sometimes you think one thing's gonna look good and then another thing looks better. I'm gonna get the warp, the base work, as well as the fringe all finished, and then we can start weaving. Before I actually start that, I wanna mention one thing. Someone smart out there had suggested using glue dots to make my loom not slide around on me. And that made me remember that I have these little silicone or rubber, I'm not sure what they are, silicone or rubber stickers that are like cabinet bumpers and kind of similar to a glue dot. So I'm gonna be trying those today. I don't know for sure if they'll be tall enough because of these screws here. I can always put them on the screws though if I need to, but for now, we're just gonna see if this will work. And then if they don't, I'll put them on the screws. They do. Okay, that's so much better than tape. Like, don't get me wrong, tape is great because then it will not move at all, but this is nice because you can still pick it up and then it's reusable instead of having to get new tape every time. For the warp, I'm using 4/8 cotton warp string, and I'm doing a single warp with a total of 32 warp strings, and my loom is 4 ends per inch. After I have the warp on, I'm going to be weaving in a piece of cardstock. Mine is about 2 3/4 inches tall. Now I'm doing the base work. I'm doing a row of plain weave, a twining stitch over top of that, followed by 2 rows of plain weave over top of that. I'm using Lion Brand Woolly Stick and Quick for this. It's the base work. It doesn't really matter what yarn I use, but a thick yarn is better in this case. For the fringe, I'm going to be cutting enough pieces that I can use 1 piece of 5mm cotton string and 2 pieces of 2mm cotton string for each grouping of my fringe. When I'm tying on the fringe, I'm literally taking those 3 pieces and I'm tying them around 2 warp strings at once using a Ryan knot. All right, so now I have all of my fringe on, so I'm ready to get started with weaving. Now the nice thing is I'm going to be using that other weaving as sort of the inspiration for this one, so I can kind of use it as a bit of a map. That being said, even though I'm using that as a reference, there might be a point where I deviate from that because it doesn't feel quite right. And just for not trying to emulate it identically, I'm actually just going to leave it over on the other side of the room and glance over at it so that I can still focus a little bit more on this weaving instead of just constantly trying to make it identical to the other one. For the first color, I'm using this dark green wool roving and I'm splitting it in half. This is something I almost always do when I'm weaving with merino wool roving. It helps your wool go a lot further. And for myself, I usually find I don't need the full thickness, but that's totally a personal preference. For the first section, I'm weaving the roving in over 2 under 2, just partway across my loom. And then everywhere that the merino is going over top the warp strings, I am pulling up little loops just to give it a little more texture. Okay, my first color is woven in. And now is where I'm going to be like, for the first few rows of this, I am going to really look at that other weaving, and maybe I will end up replicating it. I just don't want to force myself to exactly replicate it if things aren't feeling quite right. So I need to decide what color is next. Now, what differs from this one versus the other one is that I have this recycled chiffon instead of the cotton frizz ribbon. Like I do have this, but I might try to use the colors more than the white just because personally, I don't really want to put white right above the white fringe. I say white very loosely. It's clearly like more of a natural off-white, but I don't really like the idea of putting this here because it's just gonna kind of look like it's one with the fringe, which I don't want. So since I've just used green, I'm gonna go for this faded red. So I don't know how else I would describe that color. I think that's a good descriptor, or like a deep, dusty rose color, but in my opinion, it does read like a faded red. Now I need to decide what I want to do with the first section of loops. Oh, should I use this? So my initial thought was to use this for loops because I think the loopy texture is only going to then emphasize the fact that there's some shimmer to this versus just weaving it in flat. And the reason I'm thinking that is just because then the shimmer, the light is hitting it multiple ways. Does that make sense? I don't know. I don't know if that actually makes sense, but it does to me, so probably gonna go for it. This yarn is quite a lot thinner, so it's gonna take me a little bit more time to do the loops this way if I want to work directly off the ball, which I usually like to do. I swear yarn has a special magical way of tangling itself, and it has somehow knotted up again. I think I'm just going to accept that this is going to take me a little bit of time. So probably no better time than now for a time lapse. Okay, just a little pause here to talk about this texture and how fun it is. I think what it's reminding me of is actually one of those bow things that you put on a present, and it's got, instead of just being like the traditional ribbon bow, it's got all these little loops. I'll try to put a picture up here, but that's kind of what it's giving to me right now, and I kind of love it. All right, the third section. Oh, the one thing about not having my loom taped down is that I don't even notice when it goes completely crooked. But this section is done, and I absolutely love it. I think it's such a fun way to add some texture. So next I'm trying to think of what I want this sumac stitch area to look like. And I'm honestly not really feeling confident about it. I have this pale pink that I think could look really good, but I might have to lay out a couple other things just to see. So I do have this one that I was initially thinking, actually, maybe I should be using this one. Ooh, I kind of like that. But let's just lay out some other things as well, just to see. Now this is a very bright red, and I don't think it goes very well with this more pinkish red. The other option would be something like this, so like a blue color, but I don't know if that's gonna give as much Christmas. Another option is this more mustardy gold yarn. And then one kind of completely different option that I don't think this is gonna go. This is a very cool yellow, and it's very bright. And again, I feel like it reads a little more pastel than I wanna go for in this one. So these are out. And then what about white? Because I'm not doing any other white in here now. On one hand, maybe white would give it more of that Christmassy feel, but I also am worried that it's gonna feel a little bit boring. Or the pink. See, the pink is kind of an alternative to the white, where it's maybe a little bit more interesting than just off-white, but it's still more of a color than white. Okay, we're gonna go for the light pink.
Merry Christmas!
So now I'm kind of at the point where I need to add this second section of loops in a different color. So I really like the way that this type of yarn works for the loops. So I think I'm gonna go for that. Plus, again, I don't want this one to be exactly the same as the other one. So maybe using the slightly more gold toned mustard will kind of help differentiate it a little bit more. So I'm just gonna weave this in using over 2 under 2 plain weave since it's quite chunky. I didn't knot up the whole piece because it was getting a little bit long, but I can always knot it up after I cut it shorter. Next, I'm grabbing some of this green silk chiffon, and I'm going to weave that into this little section on the left. Okay, I'm pausing for a second because I'm worried about how tall the weaving already is. So I'm gonna grab the other one to just double check, just to see if it's okay. I think I'm good. Just because I know the amount that I left at the top of this one worked really well. So I just don't want to go too far and then, you know, not have enough at the top. I think if I go to there, that'll be okay. I'm starting to question how I feel about it so far, and I don't know what it is. Part of me wonders if instead of having the gold at all, if I should have just used this again. I think something about the gold is throwing me off a bit. I feel like the gold just isn't really doing anything for me. And I think, here's my theory. The thing about this weaving is every single color is a solid color, but now in this one, I've brought in a multicolor yarn. And so I feel like there's missing some balance there. So I think that I should either do more of this one or maybe add in this really deep color, but I don't know what would feel better in terms of it feeling Christmassy. I kind of, even though it takes a long time, I think my instinct is to go with this one. The nice thing about the way that I have the loops spread out in this piece as well is that the only place that they're touching is here. So I can just have a larger section of the loops, or I can extend this section and kind of cut the loops off, like have the loops only be here. So I think I might do that. Let me look one more time just to observe it. I'm feeling as though this color palette is a little bit more tricky. I'm gonna just scooch this up so I don't have to like weave that in again later. And let's just grab this and undo it. The nice thing about slip knot loops, they're very easy to undo. But the other thing I'm thinking is that by adding in more of the sparkly yarn, it's going to add more sparkle throughout the piece. Whereas if I had used this solid color, the sparkle would only have shown up in a couple of spots. And already that feels better to me. I feel like the gold just isn't it. I think this makes more sense, I think. Let's try it. All right, I pushed the red roving back down, and I do think that that was the right decision. It's feeling a little bit more balanced to me now, and also just like adding more sparkle in, which I feel looks more Christmassy, which is what I was going. I do like that it's on the more subtle side of being Christmas. I don't think it would be that weird to have this up at other times of year. Like, yes, it's red and green, but I think with the other colors, this multicolor and this light pink, it's a little more versatile than some other Christmas decor, you know? So I think this is gonna go next, and I know it's green on green, but we just do have a lot of green. I'm not mad about it. So I'm not totally sure about this green on green situation. There's not a lot of difference between this green and this green, so the contrast isn't there as much as I wish it was. So I'm gonna leave it in for now, and I'm gonna go ahead and weave in the pink sumac stitch over here, and then I'll come back to this and see how it's all coming together. So I have some of this pink sumac in now, and I need to figure out where I'm going next. I'm still questioning this side being so much green. I almost am feeling like I didn't really need both of these textures. I could have probably just chosen one. What do I do next? I do think replacing this green with the red instead is probably the right move. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and we'll see how it feels. All right, feeling better about the red instead of the green. Now I need to decide what's next. So I'm almost wondering, again, since I have less colors, if I should actually bring back the loops first. And then we need to have some knotting over here. So this is where this piece is definitely deviating from the other one. It still feels similar, but it's definitely also its own thing. I think I'm in another moment of just having to go off of vibes. And for me, the vibes are just like trying to make sure that the colors feel balanced throughout. So even though, yes, maybe this is too soon to bring back this burgundy, I need more burgundy. So I'm just gonna weave. We'll see where it takes us. Okay, I'm realizing that I really need to add my little string to mark the top. So I'm gonna go ahead and make my lark's head knot, slip that on my dowel, and then just sort of measure down from my loom to see where this weaving needs to end. Okay, I am thrilled where this has ended up. And to finish it off, I'm going to use the light pink at the very top. And the reason for this is because, one, it kind of matches my warp strings, so it's a very similar color. So when I do that twining stitch in the plain weave, the warp strings aren't going to stick out like a sore thumb. And the other thing is it's the right thickness. So I'm going to be weaving it in over one, under one. So just a standard plain weave. So what I'll do is weave in 2 rows of plain weave and then a twining stitch over that top row. All right, I'm done the weaving portion, so now I have to do all the finishing work. Now the finishing work includes tucking in this whole ridiculousness of ends. There's a lot of ends in pieces like this, but I like to start with the chunky ones first to kind of get them tucked in and it looking a little bit tidier on the back, and then I'll move on to the thinner ones. After that, I'm taking out the cardstock from the bottom of the loom. I'm going to overhand knot 2 warp strings at a time on the bottom, although on each end, I'll actually do 3 just because of the way that they're connected. And then I'm tucking those warp strings back up into the base work of the weaving so that the back of this piece is really tidy. Then I'm using lark's head knots to tie the weaving to the dowel. So I'm going to grab 2 loops at a time, open them up, flip that over, creating 2 loops, and then slipping those over the dowel. And then I'll add a hanging string using the same string as I used for the warp. Now I am going to tidy up that fringe a little bit, still allowing it to be nice and uneven because that's the look I was going for, but I do want to make sure that in general the bottom is kind of the same length without it being too drastically different throughout. All right, it's all done, so let's have a look at the finished piece. Okay, I think this is a really fun Christmas version of this piece. Let me know in the comments below which one is your favorite, and if you enjoyed this video, check out this one next.